Yep. I guess I'll just put my mail over here. Will's not using that space anyway.
Is he not here tonight?
Nope.
Check, check.
Huh? Oh, I don't know.
Good
Oh, you
evening,
mean
good
on here?
evening,
Oh, because I was at my office just.
good evening.
Oh,
Just to enter.
It is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. It is 6:31. I am 60 seconds late. But at this time, I would like to call our city council meeting to order. Invocation will be given, Pledge of Allegiance first, and then invocation will be given by
Oh, I
5th
do
Ward
want
Council Member Karen Bunnell.
To the land room. Thank you, everyone, for coming today for our city council meeting. Yesterday was the 22nd anniversary of the events of 9/11. So I just want to have a moment of silence for the lives that were lost and everything that went on that day. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if you will proceed with a roll call, please.
Mayor Mahoney,
Present.
Vice Mayor Robinson,
Present.
Councilmember Dancy,
East side.
Councilmember Gunn,
Here.
Councilmember Schlechte,
Yes.
Councilmember Bunnell,
Here.
and Councilmember Foregrave did notify my office that he would not be here this evening.
Thank you very much. And next, we would move to adoption of the agenda. Looking for a motion to support, but I do have a request to add two items onto the agenda. I think one would probably go under old business. Ad hoc committee that we discussed a couple of months ago for creating a assessment, some type of assessment guideline for the employees that the city council is directed to manage. If you guys recall that, just want to be able to appoint that actual ad hoc committee, and hoping to get some volunteers who are willing to do that work. And then also to add back just for some continued discussion, unless we had a specific date, somebody stop me if we had a specific date, to continue discussion on the development of an east side corridor.
Oh, I'm bringing you back stuff.
Is that
on the
next meeting?
Second meeting in October.
Perfect. So scratch that. Continue the first one though.
so you're adding 10.1
Correct.
special assessment conversation or special assessment
Nope. Nope.
ad hoc committee.
Not special assessment.
What was it?
Employee review, that's what it is.
Yes.
Oh, employee review.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I totally misunderstood what you
That's
were saying.
okay. That's okay.
I would like to add 10.2 then, discussion about special assessments under other.
Okay. Did you want to make a motion for the agenda as well?
Second it or make that a motion?
Make it a motion.
I'll make a motion that we add, that we.
No,
accept-
no.
Huh?
Just say it's on the agenda. Is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I make a motion that we add 10.1 for employee review task force and 10.2 for special assessment and accept the agenda as amended.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. That's to add the items and approve the agenda.
Yeah.
Any discussion on the motion? It's just a voice consent on that, okay, or do you have do you want us to, oh, she's already got it up there, never mind. The clerk will tally and display the vote. Getting quick, Madam Clerk, getting quick. Okay, the agenda's been adopted. That brings us down to item number 5, presentations and proclamations. 5.1, a presentation by our city assessor, Jason Yoakum. Sorry, the motion carried 6-0. Brings us down to 5.1, presentation by city assessor Jason Yoakum, special assessment policy. Mr. Yoakum.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, public, fellow staff. Thank you for making some time for me this evening. That's as good as it's going to get. I'll hunch over. So special assessment policy review. Give you a brief introduction of what we're in store for this evening. So I'd like to establish just some fundamental knowledge before we proceed with the changes to the policy. Then we will go through those changes individually. I'll give you some of my final thoughts on the matter, and then we'll have a couple of nice quotes to ponder and some discussion. Although we could hold the discussion until the council agenda item, should you so choose. So, why do we specially assess, I think is a good question for those that may not understand. Obviously, it provides funds for the roads, and a special assessment, I think it's important to understand, is not a tax. Rather, it is a specific levy designed to recover the cost of improvement that confer a local and peculiar benefit upon property within a defined area. And so that's cited from a court case, Cad's Band versus City of Granville. And I promise I will not read every slide. Fundamental knowledge here, a couple of things. So we're going to talk about benefit in a couple of more slides, and we're going to talk about what that means in regards to the courts. So the principle of contribution, I think if I were to provide you with an analogy, it might be, or an example that might be that we would have a deck, and maybe it cost you $5,000 to build that deck to that home. That doesn't necessarily mean when that home sells that it's going to sell for $5,000 more. It's going to sell for whatever that contributory value of that is in the market. So the price that you pay is the cost. It is not necessarily the contributory value of that attribute. So I think there's a very important distinction there that we need to make. And the second one would be the law of diminishing returns. And so the more that something costs, it also doesn't mean that there is additional value added. One way that this was explained to me as a younger man was like insulation in a house, that you pay for that first layer of insulation and it provides you with a particular R value. Should you double that cost and double that insulation, it does not provide you double that R value. So the more that we give something doesn't always mean an equal return on that. So two, I think, key points to understand in regards to the benefit discussion we're going to be having. And let's have that. So I'd like to cite a particular court case here. This is from the Supreme Court. In order for an improvement to be considered to have conferred a special benefit, it must cause an increase in the market value of the land. And so that also plays right into our very own city charter, that proportion to the benefit, that all special assessments levied shall be based upon or be in proportion to the benefits derived or to be derived. So key to that discussion is the idea of benefit. Oftentimes, and I've got another slide here because this is so important. Oftentimes, we get confused when we talk about benefit in relation to special assessments. And it's very easy to look at the use of a property and say that a property benefits because they are getting much more use out of it. And that is true, and that is a benefit. However, that's not the type of benefit that the courts are concerned with. So when we talk about benefit with the court, we are only talking about an increase in value to the property. So those two ideas are really separate from each other. I think we need to be careful with that. So I know it can be difficult to separate the two. I've had this conversation many times over the last maybe 18 months now that I've been trying to get this policy through. But I'll try to continue hammering home. And in fact, I've repeated on this slide, if anyone who's read through it, that very same case where in order for an improvement to confer that benefit, it's got to be an increase in market value to the property. There's a couple of court cases here. The leading case right now for special assessments is Cadban versus City of Granville. They cite Dixon Road Group, and Dixon Road Group has a couple of key points that I think we need to keep in mind as we work through this information. Just going to find my notes here. So it doesn't have to be, when we talk about benefit, the courts aren't saying it has to be a rigid dollar for dollar benefit. And what they mean is that if we've increased the value of a property, that it needs to be equal to the amount of special assessment. So it doesn't have to be rigid. Now, in this particular case, and although the Supreme Court upheld the special assessments, that assessment roll was reverted back for reconsideration because they felt that those special assessments were in excess of 2.6 times the amount. So we've got an amount that we know is too much, but then they don't really give us an amount that they would say is proper. So it's really up to this council to kind of define what's a proper, reasonable proportion to benefit. So, wrong way, sorry. On to the policy changes. Thanks, that's the only one I did. I didn't want to overdo it, so just the one. So I've got 9 different things we're going to talk about here, but why I'm bringing this before you, certainly cumbersome. We try to be very considerate of the time that we spend. We realize our time is taxpayer dollars being spent. My office spends an incredible amount of time. I studied this in my document. I believe what I've cited is about 48 hours per assessment roll of office time spent on this. Most of that time is spent on trying to make sure we get the front foot calculation correct. The other issue here is that of those 9 different parameters, my office is certainly charged with having to try and explain that. And some of these are a little bit challenging to try and work through with our taxpayers. And I think it's more complex than it needs to be to accomplish the same task. So I'm looking to streamline it. I want to make sure it's easy to explain and that it's easy to understand for all. I also want it to be better seated in the law. And I don't think there's anything wrong with our current policy, but I think it can be better. And that's what we're going to walk through today. So let's cover street classification. I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly as be respectful of everybody's time. And there's not much to say on some of these, so we'll just breeze through them. So street classification, currently we've got this broken down into several different categories. This is based on traffic count from our engineering's office. And so when we talk about traffic count, now we're back into what we would be considering a benefit of use. And as we've already covered, benefit is really the contributory value in the increase in market value to the property. So this kind of heads back into that other direction where we're starting to consider use of a property again. My recommendation to you would be to remove that. Next on the list here is the value of the property. This is that 25% SEV cap. I'm recommending a no change on this. I think the SEV cap is an important attribute of our policy. Currently, the value of the property, like I said, is a critical component. About 17.5% of residential housing stock, based on that 25% SEV cap, would see a full $15,000 special assessment. So the average home value based on 2023 was around $90,000 true cash. That means the average home would pay a special assessment of around $11,250 based on the idea that it would be capped. Okay, that's not to say that they would pay that if the actual cost to construct was less than that. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand me when we talk about that SEV cap. Integrated site, my recommendation would be to remove integrated site. The idea of an integrated site is that in this example, the bar graph here is showing the house and a vacant lot. And if they both received a $1,000 assessment, the house would pay that full $1,000. The vacant lot can only be assessed $200 because it would be SEV capped. What this policy does then is takes that value from that vacant lot that's been SEV capped and places it over to the house that is used as an integrated site. And so now that home would go up to an SEV cap, and I just came up with an imaginary value of $1,600 just to kind of illustrate that we would fill that up all the way to the SEV cap of the home. The challenge here on this particular policy bullet point is the idea that each assessment must stand alone and independent of the surrounding properties. Next up would be irregular shaped lots. And so if we talk about an irregular shaped lot, and this isn't a policy that gets used very much, but I will read this particular policy bullet point. The front footage assessment rate for parcels of irregular shape or size may be adjusted to place an equitable assessment that corresponds to the benefit realized from the infrastructure improvement. And so in this example, what we would end up with going through the calculation of effective front footage, which first establishes a standard depth and a depth factor. So this lot's a little bit deeper, and then it's also odd shaped. We end up with a larger front footage than they actually own. Again, based on the language of the policy, this isn't something that is implemented often, but certainly can be difficult to explain to a taxpayer who's paying on a larger frontage than they actually own. Corner lot reductions. Currently, we give a 33% break to the longest side of the parcel. And I think in a perfect world that this is just fine. However, we do not live in a perfect world. So if you consider a perfect square, we end up with some real challenges in my office about how to do that fairly. So the challenge becomes, how do we administer this? And I think the largest challenge is when both roads are local. So we've taken kind of a hierarchical approach to this, that if you have a major arterial and you have a local road, we will give that corner lot reduction to that local road because it is going to have a larger percentage based on our street classification. And then the challenge with that is we have to go back through our records to figure out somebody on a corner lot who paid that last corner lot reduction and whether it's going to be justified for which street and if they've already received it. So my solution for this is let's just do simple division. If you live on a corner, we'll take that assessment and divide it by 2. And that way, we end kind of the research, and we're going to assess that individual for half of the frontage, or half of the amount of assessment for that particular street, and then we would do the same on an adjacent street, or a cross street, rather. Type of development, so this one would be replaced with a more clearly defined per unit method. And so here's an example of the calculation currently that we are under for a 55 unit. We have what's called a residential equivalent unit. That residential equivalent unit is a calculation that the engineering's office helped us with based on, I believe, water usage. We then reduce whatever that front foot rate currently is calculated at, and then we times it by the minimum lot width allowed by zoning. And that's how we get a per unit amount. We then take that amount, times it by the number of units. I'm looking to simplify that process and have, based on a per unit method, each unit would carry a half a share, times that half a share times the number of units. So the calculated amount here you can see is much higher. However, I'm also proposing a ceiling on commercial property, again, based on the conversation of benefit that we had earlier. And we'll visit that ceiling amount here at the end of this presentation, or closer to the end of the presentation. So size of assessment to calculate installments. Currently, we have a graduated system based on the largest assessment within that special assessment district. Assessments are big. My suggestion is that we just clean this up, move it over to a 10-year assessment. I know that there have been some ideas about extending that, and I know that there are some concerns from finance. So I'd just speak on that really briefly to say that the special assessment operates in a deficit. And so when we extend that debt beyond that 10 years, we end up with less money in the special assessment fund in order to fund future projects. So that is why I think extending it beyond 10 years is not favorable. Now on to front foot and moving this over to a per unit method. This would break everything down into a per share. So we would calculate based on residential properties equal 1 share, and we would add up, if this was all residential properties and there were 20 properties within the special assessment district, there would be 20 shares. If it's in a 10-unit apartment complex, each of those units would be half a share. So that 10 unit would be a total of 5 shares. And then any commercial property that was not a condominium or apartment complex, we would give their land size consideration up to 2 acres. And then all commercial property is 2 units above 2 acres. However, we would calculate it based on the land acreage. So 5.5 acres would be 5.5 shares. That then we would take the amount to be specially assessed, divide it by the number of shares, and then spread that amount over the number of shares given over the residential commercial properties. So there's a couple of case studies here. This is a local street example. This was recently before council. This is a 32 parcel special assessment roll. 3 residential assessments changed. One increased by 7,300, one increased by almost 900, and another increased by about 200. The remaining 29 parcels were SEV capped, so obviously whether we per unit or front foot, those would really remain the same. And this was really quick for me to throw together this per unit method. It took me about a half an hour to run through those calculations. So fairly simple to explain, fairly straightforward to go through those motions. I got a minor arterial example as a case study here. This is a small special assessment district, 12 parcels, 3 were residential. All but 1 assessment changed. So 3 residential properties increased by 13, 2 non-residential increased by 7,800. 1 non-residential increased by 7,700. The remaining 5 non-residential parcels decreased, and again, that's due to that SEV cap, where we're saying that the contributory value has a limit. So they decreased, as you can see before you. The proposed policy change on the resulted was a net decrease of $24,600. So there would have been less money collected on this special assessment roll, certainly very relevant and important when we talk about wanting to fix roads. Less money coming in means less ability to fix roads, so I don't want to overshadow that a part of it. I just want to go back to that first example. That was an increase of about $8,000 on that first example. So I think it's important to note at this point that this policy doesn't overall decrease or overall increase, any type of threshold that we would be able to calculate. It's just a different way of looking at these values up to this point. And then the last bullet point here, value ceilings, 15,000 residential is already established, and I'd like to add a cap to commercial. And why a ceiling? Well, law of diminishing returns, and I left one off of here, of course, which is that principle of contribution. So some final thoughts. Look, there's no such thing as a perfect policy. You're not going to be able to please everybody. And certainly this is your folks' policy. I'm just the administrator here, but I want to bring to the table my thoughts on the issue. So certainly my desire, but this constantly bringing back the special assessment policy has made this very difficult for the folks who have to figure out how to pay for the projects coming up. So this brings uncertainty to some of our city administrators. So that I'm asking that when you look at this, that you please be mindful of that we don't have any haste or delay, as this is certainly difficult for them to try to navigate as well. Policy provides me with the framework, and I just wanted to reiterate that all special assessments levied shall be based upon or be in proportion to the benefit. Again, I can't stress enough that idea of benefit and making sure that that fits into the right box that that the Supreme Court has told us that it needs to be fit into here. So if you're having issue with the size of the assessments that were before you, I know that the last council meeting, we had 9 assessments before us. 9 assessments did not get confirmed. Some of those were because people properly petitioned. Some of those were not. If there are issues with the size of the assessments, those controlling factors are really that SEV cap amount and the ceilings that we've talked about. I got a quote here from a book I love called Extreme Ownership. If you're not familiar, it's a great read. Authors Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. So combat, like anything in life, has inherent layers of complexities. Simplifying as much as possible is crucial to success. When plans and orders are too complicated, people may not understand them, and when things go wrong, and they inevitably do go wrong, complexities compound issues that can spiral out of control into total disaster. I've also mentioned on this slide that layers of complexity have served little purpose by which simpler processes could have accomplished the same. I truly believe that to be true. We are pulling a lot of levers in my office to render what the courts only need to understand is either reasonably proportionate to benefit or not. And there is always an exception to the rule. So special assessments are a challenge. We're not going to draft a policy this evening that is going to fit every little thing. It's an island in Iceland, apparently, that's used for a hunting cabin now. A couple of quotes to ponder before I wrap it up here. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Freddie told me that first name is pronounced Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Thanks, Freddie. And Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And I have lived my entire assessing career by that very quote. Thanks for listening. That's That's all I've got tonight.
Thank you. So your request is for us to hold questions until the,
We can do it either way, whether you want to have them now or whether you
I'm
rather
fine.
wait till the agenda item.
I put on the agenda because I didn't want to make motions and things during the presentation. So,
Mayor, what's your pleasure?
the pleasure of the council?
Yeah, I would just like to wait until the agenda item show up. That's just me.
a good leader. I'll go with Fred. Okay.
I don't
Okay,
think that's
so
going to require a vote.
Seeing kind of some nods on the same.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Brings us down to item number 6. We have no public hearings, which brings us to item number 7, public comment. And I will start as usual with reading the rules for speaking before the city council. Number 1, each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes during the citizen comment portion of the meeting. 2, during public hearings. This is not a public hearing, sorry. During public hearings, the city council may enact, this is not a public hearing, sorry. Number 3, each speaker shall be polite and courteous at all times, while any speaker is free to express his or her opinion on any subject. No speaker may curse, direct personal insults at any member of the staff or council, use obscene language while addressing city council, or engage in disruptive or disorderly behavior during a council meeting. Number 4, should the mayor determine that any of the items listed in item number 3 occur, the mayor may declare the speaker out of order. Number 5, if a speaker is declared out of order by the mayor and refuses to cease and desist from disruptive or disorderly conduct, the mayor may order the person removed from the meeting, and you may not yield your time to another speaker. And Dina Morgan.
Hello, my name is Dina Morgan. I live at 245 East Robinson Street, Southside. I'm here for Terrion Waters, 19-year-old Terrion Waters, who was shot at Chalet Terrace. When people think of civil rights, the path to equality for the black community comes to mind. Some community leaders are working to create change, and some are avoiding offending the Go Along, Get Along gang. Speaking of gangs, the Gun Violence Prevention Program has not reached out to the Walters family. No one has knocked on their door or given them a call. And I'm here this evening to speak up about the injustice that Terrion Waters is experiencing after he was shot in the neck by his neighbor. I think I'm very concerned, and I was honored to view the video footage when Terrion was shot, and I'm shocked that the shooter is not in jail. I don't know what's going on. Like I said, no one has reached out to Terrion's family. They had a protest, 2 protests thus far, and no answers from City Council, from the Jackson Police Department, from the Gun Violence Prevention Program, 0, communication. He's now paralyzed from the neck down, from the chest down. So I would like the Jackson Police Department to respond to the family and the community. Like I said, there have been 2 protests, another one is planned. And the family and the community needs answers. After dealing with the police department, going down to the police station, I believe that the unsolved shootings in Jackson are not the fault of the community. The officer said that they need more money, they need a raise. So I believe that families have been cooperating, they've been lied on, and I think, our community needs help. You all need to step up or step down. Arlene Robinson, we have no ward meetings. Things are going on in our community that we don't know about. We still have questions. And we need answers. We need leadership. There's a project going up right now for affordable housing. We don't know how much the rent will be in that area. We need more ward meetings, Arlene. Thank you.
John C. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John King, 203 3rd Street here in the city. This afternoon, I was watching the CBS streaming news, and they mentioned Joe Biden and the Republicans having, like maybe starting, looking into a more official process of looking into Joe Biden. But they're suggesting that, maybe there's not a whole lot of evidence against him or anything like that, which is basically a lie, a media lie. Joe Biden has really been directing his son to get millions and millions. There's been over $20 million that have been documented that the Biden family has received. Some people think it could be even upwards of $50 million that the Biden family has received from foreigners. So it's not just politics that the White House now will complain about. But there is like the indictments on Donald Trump, because some people don't like what he says, think he's a jerk and stuff like that. And then there's the Trump electors in Michigan that Dana Nessel has politically charged them, with crimes, and it's just a lot of people call it sort of like the U.S. becoming a banana republic with politics like that going on. Also, kind of in that same train of thought is some of our like one past council member and currently Counter Wood, who's running for the city council. He gerrymandered things so that Laura Schlechte would no longer be in the 4th Ward. And so I had seen on his Facebook page that Colleen Sullivan mentioned in response to him talking about sign changes that the Queen's Church or by the school, that the sign, a lot of people have been complaining about it. And so that was maybe a reason for them to, crack down on signs like that. Now, of course, there's a street light there and an overhead light. So, I mean, that's sort of made up. And, of course, with Queens, Connor Wood and Colleen Sullivan sees them as an enemy. They don't go along with their politics. So, Colleen Sullivan was here, tried to use the inspection department against Ira Combs Homes because of politics. So I would say vote for Diane Toman, not Connor Wood. Thank you.
William Hastings.
William Hastings, 1231 Highland. Concerning Mr. Yoakum's presentation, I have to say that I think the notion of an $11,200 cap on assessments is a non-starter, and I think it is a slap in the face to homeowners in Jackson. Divide that number in two, and maybe we can start having a discussion. So on August 22nd, there was a massive fire on North Street at a 200,000 square foot abandoned factory site. Despite a flurry of local media coverage and several code red city alerts, all of the reporting from the city and media alike failed to mention a single extremely important fact about this local disaster. Here's what the TV, print media, mayor, council, and other city officials failed to tell you. The factory site at 140 and 150 North Street is an EPA cleanup site. It is a site so contaminated with toxic waste that is a direct concern of the federal government and the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA recently spent 14 months assessing this site for cleanup, but the actual cleanup was never performed. So what was on that site? Asbestos, petroleum products, VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, which includes many chemicals and industrial solvents, fuel oxygenates, and chloroform. This was represented to the public as just a big fire in an old building, but not as a direct environmental hazard that may sicken and kill many people in Jackson for years to come. As the Brooklyn Exponent, which did actual detailed reporting, noted, quote, officials say they can't yet say for sure whether those chemicals could create a long-term health hazard to homes surrounding the burned property. Oh. They also report that 25 of the 23 debris samples collected, approximately a quarter, tested positive for asbestos. Oh. There don't seem to be any efforts underway to survey residents of that part of town as to their personal exposure that day or to measure long-term environmental impact. So at the most basic level, incumbents Daniel Mahoney, Will Forgrave, Freddie Dancy, and City Hall insider and member of the Environmental Commission, Connor Wood, that nowhere to be seen after one of the worst environmental events in city history, they all represent the indifference and arrogance of a city government that literally does not care if you live or die. Vote the clean sweep ticket in November. Peter Bournemouth in the 2nd Ward, Diane Toman in the 4th, Steve Ann Sweeney in the 6th, and John Wilson for mayor. The health and lives of your families are on the line. Wake up, Jackson. This is not a dream, and this is not a drill.
Diane Toman.
Diane Toman, 512 Spark Street, Jackson, Michigan, Ward 4. This incident came up just as on my way here. When are those railroad crossings going to be opened? You know, I'm coming down Lansing Ave and it has a closed 2 miles ahead. I go down Ganson and I can look down Blackstone. It's not closed. So somebody didn't move the sign back so that we would know that. I don't like to go down West Avenue. I don't like to go down Monroe. It's too bad. It's going to tear my car apart. I only go down Monroe when I have to because of our terrible roads. But I just starting out with that. After door knocking for 2 weeks, the 100 Homes project is a bust. I found 2 people that knew anything about it. I do agree with Laura. The homes at 905 on Blackstone, they're not a 2-story, they're a 1-story. We need more of those types of homes in our area for handicapped people or people who cannot go upstairs. The other homes look just like the ones that you built in the 80s when you look at them. And if you don't know where they're at, I can tell you later. Our roads are terrible. We can't think of anything else besides our water, which that situation is getting set with the lead lines. But we have to get these roads fixed. It's not just my street. My street's fine, but other streets. You can't have new houses if you don't have good roads. We are known to, across the state, of having the worst roads in the state, even compared to Detroit, which I don't know. That's just what I was told. Another issue that I got to quickly go through is that homeowners are being fined for not trimming the trees in their right-of-way. I don't know. That's what one person told me. That's all I can go by. And she had a carport in the backyard for a canopy for a sun porch. She was fined for that. Another individual who has since moved had a boat on a trailer at the side of his garage. I've seen it multiple times. It looked fine. And another lady on Wisner told me that her son's car had part of one tire on the back grass, and that it was not in the driveway, and she was fined. She fought that and then got fined for $350 for court costs. We can't do that. We're all here to make our community better. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared Montgomery.
Gerald Montgomery, 341 Hill Street, Jackson, Michigan. I'm here about this $8.4 million that you granted for the water pipes to be replaced. They say it can be done for less, cover every property in the city of Jackson. And it don't take 35 years. Sub it out to somebody like Lansing did and get it done in 10 years, because I probably won't be here in 35 years. And that mess on North Street, seen come by there this afternoon about 3:30, and there's two kids playing around inside the fence with all the burnt process. Now let's get it cleaned up. Take care of it. Make the property owner pay for it. Thank you.
Bonnie Kraus.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Bonnie Kraus. I live at 840 Lincoln. Can you hear me? I live at 840 Lincoln Street, and I have two items to ask you about. One is the fall cleanup. I use it every year. I use it in the spring, too. I really need that service. I don't see it happening this year. I don't know the date. I usually hear about it on Code Red. September 24th last year is when we had our last fall cleanup. So I hope that we have one again, because I really, honest to God, think we need it, especially with all the bad storms we've had. And then the second thing is, I noticed on our agenda 11.7, it's talking about 840 Bush Street getting a light. Well, Lincoln Street runs parallel right next to Bush Street. I live at 840 Lincoln, and you cannot see the nose in front of your face, your hand in front of your face at night. There is a pole next to my driveway. If we can get a light on that, I would be so grateful, because we really need it, and we've had a lot of vandalism for the few cars that have to park out into the street. So if you could put a light at the pole next to 840 Lincoln Street, boy, that would be so wonderful. So thank you. And do you have a date for fall cleanup this year? That's what I was hoping to get tonight.
Peter Bormu.
Peter Bournemouth, 142 West Pearl Street. I want to address the proposal by the city assessor, Jason Newcomb, and the proposal that was made by city council person Laura Schlechte. I feel like the cap that is proposed, SUV cap, it was $15,000 for private homes. Recently on this slideshow, it looked like it was 11 and some. If you recall, most of the people who were up here complaining about the assessments on their property were talking about $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 assessments. So this proposal is not going to help the people who are coming here and who need help with their personal property when they're living on a fixed income. The second thing I want to notice is that there is this $30,000 SUV cap on commercial properties. I am completely 100% opposed to the idea that we set a cap on these apartment complexes that are owned by these real estate investors that have raised rents on the people in this town for the last 4 years, who are making all kinds of money. They can contribute to our streets. Thank you.
Donald Walters.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Donald Walters, 3839 Kingsbury Street, Jackson, Michigan. I'm on behalf of my nephew, Terrion Hamilton Walters. Like Ms. Dungy has said, our family had looked at the videos and everything that came along with what had happened, and we would like for y'all to like at least have the city department, police department do a more thorough investigation, or the sheriff department do a more thorough investigation. Blackman Township can do the same thing in the Michigan State Police Department. And I like to say, I know if it was vice versa, I think he would be locked up. I'm gonna say it like that. And I know things happen in our streets and the gun violence and all the violence and the drugs that's going on in our community. I don't know if we got a program where people can step in and try to help out our community and try to get the young kids before they get to the age of like 13, 14, and they got their minds made up, taken over by seeing expensive drug cars and, you know, the life that they live on the street. I just wish that our community could come together. I don't like violence, and I don't condone doing violence. I've been there, done that, went to prison for all those things. I just want the community to come together and you know, so we can come up with an answer for what happened to my nephew. And besides that, I would like to thank y'all for taking time listening to me.
Thank you. That concludes citizens' comment. Brings us down to item number 8, petitions and communication from city staff and other governmental entities to be accepted and placed on file. Item 8.1, I should make a motion to just remove it from the agenda. I don't know if I can actually do that, though. Karen Bunnell, resignation from city council effective September 30th, 2023. Looking for a motion and support.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Yes, let's receive that resignation.
So the comment from Vice Mayor was to receive that resignation with regret.
Don't go make me feel bad.
That's what we're trying to do. Any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote.
You would have to abstain.
Item 8.2, looking for a motion and support to accept and place on file the Environmental Commission minutes for 5/17/2023 and 6/21/2023.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote.
Did you get mine? Okay. My mouse is there.
Me? I had it. Yep.
Here we go.
Item passes unanimously, brings us down to the consent calendar. Looking for a motion and support on the consent calendar.
So moved.
I'd like to pull 9.3 off for separate consideration, please.
Okay, it has been, is that a second with the removal of that item?
I'll support it.
Okay, so it has been, we'll say you moved it, Laura, is that okay?
Yeah, that
With the
works.
exception of 9.3 being voted independently, and it has been supported by Councilmember Bunnell. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Consent calendar passes unanimous, brings us down to consent calendar item 9.3. Looking for a motion and support for the appointment to the Building Code Board of Examiners and Appeals of Mr. Smith, Joe Smith.
Second it.
It's moved and supported. Discussion?
Yeah, so the Building Code of the Board of Examiners and Appeals are chosen by the mayor, confirmed by council. These citizens are appointed for 3 years. Must be made up of at least 5 members, including a building contractor, an architect or engineer, 2 members of the general public, and 1 registered building official. Where does he fall in that? Because I know he's a fire department.
He'll be a resident.
Does he live in the city?
He lives in the city, he's right on his application.
And
Well, I guess he put it the fire, but he lives in the city.
so who's our registered building official on that
On
board?
that one, I don't remember who else is on that. Chip, do you remember?
I could probably look it
Brian.
up, but is that,
Brian Taylor.
Because I think we had this discussion before, and I don't think you can have more than one, because he works for the city, and the things that are gonna go in front of the Building Board of Examiners and Appeals is something that is against the city, that you cannot have more than, the registered building official on there. So I'm not sure that he's qualified to be the.
Yeah, he's definitely qualified. Otherwise, he wouldn't be on there. And we've had a longstanding practice of having a fire official on there because we're dealing with building code issues.
just for clarification,
You can
isn't
change it,
this
of
a,
course.
isn't this a recommendation of a replacement of Chad Evers, who's actually retiring
Yeah.
from the fire department, correct?
Yeah.
Brian Taylor, Chief Building Official, staffs the Building Code Board of Appeals and Examiners, and he staffs it. And Chad Everett was he's a fire official who's counted as one of the building officials that we have.
There you go. That clarifies. Sorry about that. I was
Does that help?
wrong. You were right.
All set?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
I think I have a lot of people that have my back.
Any additional discussion on the item? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. No, it's passed. Okay, that brings us down to, item passes, it's right on the screen for you viewing, as well. And that brings us down to other business, item 10.1. Should be fairly simple and straight to the point. A couple of, I would say probably 2 months ago, we had a discussion about, creating an ad hoc committee to charge them with creating a method for us to do an annual employee review. That would be an annual review for the 4 employees that we are charged with actually managing. So city manager, our appointed officials. So just want to actually put that ad hoc committee together. And just want to open the opportunity for volunteers to be involved with that. I can text them, but I had a previous conversation with Will Forgraves. I know he said he would be interested. Are there any additional interested parties in serving on that ad hoc committee? This ain't up to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's 1,000% correct. He took the words right out of my mouth.
I was actually hoping that you would. Okay. Can we have a third person? Freddie Nancy, don't be looking away when I'm looking your way. I'm hoping that's going to be my next request. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right. That's what I'm talking about. So, perfect. Perfect. And then, so just can we get a motion? No, I think that's up to the board. Yeah, I think just employee review, ad hoc committee. Just with the caveat of returning to council at first meeting in October. You can do it. I got faith in you. I said I got faith in you. It's a good date.
With a recommendation for the review, not.
Perfect, yes. Is there a second to that motion?
No.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any discussion? The only request I will make, I don't have to be present, but will you just make sure you notify me of the dates that you guys do plan to meet? And I will send you some items that I've been researching that might help make the process a little faster. So I will probably not be present unless someone else is absent. I'll be present if someone else is absent. Any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. For those who volunteered for that ad hoc committee, looking forward to seeing those results come back. And that brings us to 10.2 special assessment consideration. We can't. You want to start that discussion?
Sure. I was gone last week. I had a daughter get married.
Congratulations.
But, so I didn't get to see if this is different than what you gave us, Jason. I don't think it is. So I gathered up my old notes. I will tell you what I would like to see if we can start with that type of discussion. The, current, it's a it works out to roughly be 25% of SCV in simple. It's a convoluted, formula, but basically if you do the math, it's about 25% of SCV with a $15,000 cap for a special assessment. So when we look at the houses on First Street or any of the ones that we most recently looked at, that makes their assessment roughly $8,000 to $10,000, which I personally, as a realtor, with my experience, 40 years in the real estate field,
You speaking to the mic? No, you don't.
God, you're good, Freddie. Anyhow, with my experience as a realtor and appraiser and way back, I don't think that that value adds to the real estate. But if I do the math and I take that down to 12.5% of SCV, where the special assessments get down to a $4,000 roughly for that area. But then you translate that over into a higher valued area, you're still gonna get roughly, I think, the same type of value. I do think we saw value on Franklin Street, which was a really big project. And it has a variety of value of homes on it. And that's where we put the $15,000 cap in after Jason's recommendation. But just to deal with one item at a time, I mean, I can see where 12.5% of the SUV is more reasonable and attributable to value, not 25%.
Mr. Dancy.
Yes, I guess before I move forward, I'd just like to get input from the engineering department. Their thoughts on this, what the effect would be, would lose, not have enough money to finish the project, just trying to get input from another department. John?
I guess, what's questions are you looking for? What?
You just wouldn't do as many.
So I think,
rows.
just your opinion on per unit versus front footage.
Per unit versus front footage is summed up easily as the poor will subsidize the rich. Plain and simple. Because, the Franklin Street being the example, at the east end of that project, you had lots that were like 66-foot frontage, possibly some that were about 60 foot. At the west end, you have people that own half a block, and they are owning more than 130, 140 feet of frontage. If you have it each, you're saying that the person that is poorer, is not as wealthy as the others, are paying the same amount of assessment as, the each is the person that has the big house with the swimming pool and they own half of the block on Franklin, but then they owned like 200 feet going down the side street. Those lots, to say that they are the equal to, everybody paying each does not make sense. Capping the businesses, a few years ago, we did the work on Wisner. If you go and you look at that, the amount of front footage that Sears owns on Wisner Street is almost like a quarter of a mile. And they were assessed $86,000. Everyone was concerned that Sears was going to come and fight us and everything else. They didn't say boo. They just paid their assessment, and that project went. But they also owned huge frontages. If you go on to the east side of the city, you've got Consumers owns the old power plant where Goodyear used to set. They own a whole block over there. The people on the other side of the street, you must have 5 or 6 houses there. You're going to cap Consumers at $30,000? This past council meeting, when you approved North Street,
That was all commercial.
it was a commercial on the north side. One of them was 46,000. That was on that assessment. And that was approved by this council. So to say that, we want to ratchet it down, it will bring in less money the more you lower that. And by front footage, you could, instead of spending a lot of time analyzing some of the lots that are by meets and bounds description, just round it to the nearest foot. Don't try and sit there and figure out to what decimal is it, and that would save a lot of time in analyzing what the amount of frontage is that? And, you know, it's, like one of my technicians years ago said, we're not building a Swiss watch here, we're just building a road. You know, and so the length that you're calculating things out to do not need to be to multiple decimal places. Just round the assessments to the front, you know, 1 foot or something. And if you're concerned, round down. So that's a few items that we have from engineering.
So don't you think, just to banter back and forth if we may?
Okay.
Don't you think
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was comfortable. Don't you think that the value, so if we did and I don't know about the front foot versus unit yet. I haven't absorbed all that. But don't you think that the value of a property on Franklin down towards Bowen is going to be higher? And just eliminate the thought about the cap at the moment. If the house is, I don't know, $400,000 house, and they're paying 12.5% versus 25%, and then you go over to Burr Street and the house is a $80,000. In that block that we just did, maybe it's an $80,000 house. I'm not sure how the poor would be subsidizing the rich
Well, no, I'm saying on
until
one-
we put a cap on it.
On each street, though, if you're looking at, you know, because we went through this argument with Patrick in the past, because he was saying, well, it's not their fault that they got a larger lot. Actually, it is. I knew intentionally when I was looking for my house, I bought a 50-foot lot. I didn't even buy a 66. I got one that's on a small little lot, because I know how front footage works. And so somebody who goes and buys a 132-foot lot, that was intentional. They wanted the wide lot. So if you go and buy that much frontage, you are responsible for that much frontage. And to say that each house is each, and so like on the street that I live on, there are some that have multiple lots. And that was their choice, to acquire multiple lots. But to say that they should pay the same front foot, or, you know, same as just each, so I would have to pay more money, because you're dividing amongst the same amount. And so if there is 15 houses on the street, you're dividing the amount by 15. But if you're looking at front footage, and most of us have 50-foot lots, but some of them have a 150-foot lot, you're saying that the 150-foot lot is equal to the same thing as a 50-foot lot, where that person intentionally bought additional lots so they could have a bigger yard and more frontage there.
But wouldn't the bigger yard add to the value of the property?
But if you do it by each, you're saying that, you know, the smaller lot is the same value as the bigger lot. Yes, the bigger lot would have more value. And the person who's bought that, typically that house would be more money as you're buying it because it's on bigger land.
But if I'm in
I'm
your-
sorry, I just want to give some other people
Yeah.
opportunity to ask some questions also. Is there anybody else on council who has some questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I did want to ask about the new method, why one property would increase so much? Why did that happen? The other ones, you know, 400 or 200 or whatever that was, but the one that increased $7,700, why would that happen?
Yeah, and I don't have those individual scenarios in front of me, but I can certainly get that information for you, Councilwoman. Then if I could just briefly address the concerns that Mr. Dowling has raised, I would only reiterate the Supreme Court's position that we are talking about the contributory value to a property, and that needs to be reasonably proportionate. So I know we get caught up in the amount of frontage that somebody might own, but the real question at hand is the utility of that road and the repair of it and how much contributory value that has. Thank you.
Councilmember Gunn, looked like you had a
I know,
question.
I'm just
can see your
listening.
wheels
I'm
turning.
listening and I'm taking a lot of notes, and it's just, it's complicated to, again, putting a cap at 15,000 is still a significant amount of money if we think about, all the people that came into city council the last few meetings. And so, for me, that just, I don't know, that to me is a continued concern.
None of them reached the cap, though, did they, Jason?
Came pretty
Burr.
close.
Did they? Well, that's where I think the reduction in the percentage
So-
is gonna make a huge difference.
So I had a barrage of questions that I don't think we have time for tonight, I'm gonna be honest. But I think that my opinion on the issue, even after the presentation, still generally stands the same, especially with the input of the engineer, kind of confirming exactly what my assumption is. From what it looks like, and I would ask for an opinion from the assessor on this particular issue. Would it be an accurate assumption to say that this change would cause a general decrease for streets that have a majority of commercial properties and a general increase for streets that are majority residential property? And I ask that question because all of the research that I've done really says that a per unit method of assessing properties is best for a community that has a majority of multi-family homes or multi-unit buildings, whereas Jackson is majoritarily a single-family home. Even if they're rentals, they're single-family homes is a majority of what we have in stock in the community of Jackson.
So to answer your question, certainly I haven't viewed the data in that way, but on a residential property, in one of the examples I gave to you today, although a couple of those properties were adjusted, the majority were already SEV capped for the majority residential. So the SEV cap on local roads where houses are, given that the cost to construct is so large now, I would say that regardless of the method, the SEV cap is what comes into play the majority of the time. So I can't answer that question exactly, but I would say in my view of assessments in general, we are SEV capped, so the method that we apply is irrelevant. For commercial properties, you're correct. So my idea that there needs to be a cap on amount of commercial value stems from the idea of contributory value to the property, and that there is a limit of the amount that the road utility provides to the improvement in market value to that property.
So I mean, in my research, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the research that I found, front footage is the most commonly used method of doing assessments in communities, especially single-family home communities.
So, Mayor, I did not survey other communities. I will tell you that the front foot method and the per unit method are both accepted by the courts.
So, from what I see, we've got 4 issues then? Percentage of SEV, cap, unit versus front footage, and category of streets. Am I missing anything?
Say that again, SEV cap. Per
Cap,
unit versus
unit
front
versus
footage.
frontage, front foot, and category of streets. And I think the category of streets is still important, because if I live on, what was Franklin Street, John? Is that what was that considered? A minor? No. A principal artery, or was it a minor? But anyhow, that's 75%. I mean, I've talked to people on, but more people are using their streets than your local, just, going to, if you're coming to my house, there's more people who use my house, the street, Michigan Avenue, than who use your street. Right? So the sharing of the cost should be higher on the municipality, I believe.
So I think that's an accurate breakdown of the different issues that we're looking at here. And I think that even with like lowering the SEV cap, like changing, because I think the request right now is to look at changing the overall policy as proposed. And even lowering the SEV cap, which I think is a great idea, I think changing the method still changes the formula in which that SEV cap is reached by each individual, and would still be causing more of an increase to citizens. Even though the cap would be lower, it would still be causing a larger increase for single-family homes than it would be causing a decrease. And I understand, and I think the challenge here is our assessor is looking at this from the perspective of a court ruling opinion on what contributory value is, whereas we as council got to look at the bottom dollar of how this is going to impact our citizens, the majority or the largest percentage of our citizens, most importantly, in my opinion. And I just cannot, with a clear conscience, support something that is going to cause more of an increase. I think we definitely could have a discussion about SEV caps. I would not personally be interested in discussing any changes to doing a per unit versus a front footage. I would not be interested in that conversation personally. But it is the pleasure of the council.
Can we ask that you bring back at the next council meeting? Because it's not like when we did the cap on the $15,000, that was the only issue we dealt with. We didn't deal with 4 different recommendations by you. Could we ask that you bring back some of the assessments that have been done, or that were of the 8 that we did or didn't do? Bring back, pick a couple, and then pick maybe Franklin Street, because that's a good mix of housing.
But I think that's what he
prices.
did, though.
Yeah, that's what
I mean,
these
and we
graphs
have
is
graphs
about
from the last
chart
time and in the presentation, and I think the problem with looking at projects that we've already evaluated is if we do decide to do something different, then how do we rectify what we've already done up to this point?
Well, I
That's
don't,
I wouldn't think we could go back.
I mean, I think
I
it's
mean, I don't
like,
think we could, Madam Vice
That's what I'm
Vice
saying. I don't
Mayor,
see us
but
going back.
that is definitely not going to be the perception of our citizens if they see something that's changed that may benefit how they're currently being assessed, for sure.
well, we could go back to anything that hasn't been built yet.
That's true.
So nothing's being built until July of next year. I mean, nothing, unless we did it prior to June 1 of this year. I don't know that we did much before June 1. Now watch, somebody will take that vocal clip and misuse that somehow, won't they? Since there's a political campaign out there, but I'm not in it anymore. Little levity. But these are graphs. These, I'm sorry. I'm a visual person.
I know.
But I'm also like, I like to read those numbers. I'd rather say Franklin Street is this, under the current policy, today's, and you got the numbers because you did all the measurements. I'm not asking you to go out and measure anything new. This is what Franklin Street was under this current policy, and this is what it would be under, and give them some ideas. 12.5% SEV. Keep the cap at 15 for now because that's easy to fluctuate, and compare unit versus front footage.
Just as an alternative solution to that, or proposal to that, there were a couple of assessments that we voted no on in the last assessment roll due to the constituents completing the petitions. So what if we used one of those as an example and said, hey, this is what you could have paid before you signed the petition, or this is what you could pay under a new solution, versus something that obviously I know we've talked about, something that we've already done. You can't turn back time and upset people by saying, well, we could have changed this, a year ago or 2 years ago, and just say, this is something that we've recently voted no on, but this is what it could be if we did it again under the new proposed plan.
There's a lot of this world we could have changed if we could go back in time. And at some point, you just got to move forward. So,
Is there any other comment, discussion to be had on this item today?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to, I know I talked with Jason, I talked with his presenter, the one in front of him before this, and there's a lot of conversation going on about this, and special assessments are tough. But I'm at the point now that I'm ready to make a vote on this, and just listening to what John said and listening to what Jason said, I just don't see at this time moving to change the policy. Maybe some things in the policy I think we can look at maybe change, but change the whole policy, I'm not ready to do that at this time. So do I make a motion?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to stick with the old policy or turn down the policy, the new policy that was presented. How did you say that?
I think that was said well.
Okay.
There's a motion on the floor. I would second that motion for discussion. Any discussion on the motion on the floor?
I think we have to do something about what we're charging people. It's too much. And we cannot, no one should lose their home simply because we're doing the road in front of them. And I recognize we have to do our roads. I get that. But we are 32% low income in this community. And we have got to, when we talk about not having enough housing stock, we just have to do what we can. And what we have, the 25% of SEV does not justify the value that's put on these properties, I think, in general. I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule, but in general, in the cap, obviously protects some, but just ignoring the cap, if it's just the 25%, I can't justify.
I totally agree. Something has to be changed. I just don't think this is the answer. Personally, I think that overall, like all of the graphs that I've seen are consistent, as well as what was presented today being consistent, and this is going to raise assessments for the general single-family home owner. Like across, it's going to raise it for the majority of people. Some may see a lower assessment, and again, the recommendation that was just made by Councilman Dancy, I would be in total agreement with, which is to decline changing the overall policy and maybe look at changing parts of the policy instead of an overall change of the way we do assessments. That means that we could definitely come back next month and entertain lowering that SEV cap to 12.5%, because then that would be a general decrease for everybody,
Right.
according to the way we're doing it right now. Would that make it more challenging for the city to get roads done? Absolutely, because that means less money. But I think that overall, it's probably the right thing to do, because as of right now, we had, I think, 7 out of 9 assessments fail, and one of those, I received a request for us to bring back up, which I was on the opposing, so I couldn't bring it back up. One of those was proposed to be brought back up to decline that one because they said that a majority of the property owners on that street actually signed petition, but it just didn't get turned in. So it just leaves me very concerned about raising the overall assessment so I would be in favor of evaluating the SEV or other parts that may help us reduce assessments. I would support the motion on the floor. Any other discussion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote.
We either have to talk faster or something, because my computer likes to sleep.
Mine's not.
Can we do a verbal vote?
My computer's just acting weird.
I mean, it's not coming up.
Oh, now it's there.
I'm not opposed to doing a voice vote if it moves things along a little faster. Madam Clerk, would you proceed with a voice vote? Yes.
Vice Mayor Robinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Dancy,
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlechte,
And this is to turn down, yes.
Councilmember Benel.
Yes.
Okay. And then as we finished, it posted it, that we all voted. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us down to item 11.1. Looking for a motion to support to approve the sale of 2 city-owned properties to Fresh Start Real Estate for the purpose of new home construction.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion?
Is this on 11? I'm sorry.
This is 11.1.
Yeah, I just have a question. One of the houses, I think it's on Hanson, is set back. They had their choice between from the front yard or back yard. And then the driveway stops, like, at the corner of the house. I'd like to have some of these issues go to the planning commission, because I don't want, if I bought that house on Ganson, I'd want to be, and this is just kind of in general, so this, right now, whoever builds these houses can do the same thing, that's why I'm talking about it. That's the relevance. If I wanted to build a garage and add that on, because a lot of these houses don't have garages, now I've got to add concrete, and the cost now just becomes a lot more than what, so. And then, of course, if your front yard and you're building a 3 and a 4 bedroom house, probably have children, and children have toys and like to play outside, and that all lands in the front yard as opposed to in the backyard, which then the neighborhood starts to get a little bit messy sometimes. So I'd like to see some of these issues go to the planning commission to be addressed, if that's possible. Thank you. I mean, I'm going to vote yes for this, because who doesn't want new construction? But I think we need to fine tune some of some of these issues. Yeah, well, right. Thank you.
Okay, clerk will tally and display the vote.
Check again.
Voice vote?
Patience. Okay, she can take your vote by
Thank you.
voice.
My dog's at home all by herself.
Oh.
Aw. So,
Councilmember Schlechte.
I think yours is the only one that needs to be voted.
I
So
keep
just
hitting that
thumbs
little
up or down.
button.
That's okay, you can just give her a thumbs up and down.
yes.
Okay. Okay, passes unanimous. That brings us down to 11.2 for first reading of ordinance number 2023-06. Looking for a motion and support to approve the first reading and move to a second reading / final adoption of an ordinance amending the hours of operation for marijuana provisioning centers and retailers. I think the request is for it to be 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock for closing. So we'd be looking for a motion and support.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and supported.
Let's see. I'll let you know.
Any discussion?
Oh, it worked.
Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote. And that one passes 5-1. Freddie Dancy was very tempted to make a recommendation to just not allow them to open at all. Brings us down to 11.3, looking for a motion and support for the approval of purchase of three 2023 Dodge Durango SUVs for $44,150 each from John Jones Auto Group for a total cost of $132,450 outside of the normal purchasing guidelines for the police department.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Does this replace the three back order?
No, it does not. This is.
Sorry, your mic is
Yep,
off still.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
It does not replace, we still have actually 5 on order, Ford Explorers. These 3 will be what we budgeted this fiscal year, so we are still waiting on vehicles. We do think acquiring these 3, we'll be able to cut one of those 5 that are on order currently, to taking us down to the 4. And there's still no answer from Ford on when we would expect those, so we're gonna look at some alternatives possibly as well to those ones that we've been waiting on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
None.
Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimous, brings us down to 11.4. Looking for a motion and support for the approval of the request to schedule a public hearing at the September 26, 2023 City Council meeting regarding the use of federal grant funds totaling $51,526 to be used by the City of Jackson Police Department and the Jackson County Sheriff of the Office of the Sheriff, sorry.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion on the item? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Item passes unanimous. Brings us down to 11.5. Looking for a motion and support to approve, for approval of a resolution to accept a trust fund grant application for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for a new trail project from Southwest Ave to Kibbe Trail entrance, and authorize for the mayor and the clerk to execute the appropriate documents.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Item passes unanimous. Brings us down to 11.6. Looking for a motion and support for the Amendment 2 to the Engineering and Project Administration SCADA software upgrades contract for the City of Jackson wastewater treatment plant.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion on the item? Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote. Item passes unanimous. Brings us down to 11.7, looking for a motion and support to change the standard lighting contract for street lights with Consumers Energy for installation of one new street light at 840 Bush Street.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion on the item?
Can we, I know that we've got a handful of streetlights that we're gonna be putting in. Is there anything in the works for something on Lincoln? And if not, can we look at putting something in there on Lincoln?
John hasn't read his email yet, but there's something in the works on Lincoln.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Seeing or hearing no other discussion on the item, clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimous, brings us down to 11.8, looking for a motion and support for change order number 3 to the wastewater treatment plant Clean Water State Revolving Fund 2022 improvements contract with Allied Mechanical Services Incorporated for an increase in the amount of $103,054 to be authorized by the city manager and director of public works to execute the appropriate documents.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote. Item passes unanimously. Brings us down to 11.9, looking for a motion and support to approve the option agreement for 8 city-owned lots in the Martin Luther King Jr. corridor to Jonathan and Paula Autry for the purpose of building 6 affordable rental structures totaling 24 units.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion on the item?
That to me speaks volumes, because Paula is no longer here, and she's coming back because she sees great opportunity, and she sees Jackson as a great place to invest. I think that speaks volumes.
Jackson is a great place to invest.
Yeah. So,
But I don't think Paula ever left. So, and this also definitely fills a need for the affordable housing and matches up with,
I think that's awesome.
and has been supported by the MLK corridor order. Please. Thank you. Any further discussion from council? Seeing or hearing none, clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimously. Brings us down to 11.10, looking for a motion and support to approve the first reading and advance to the second reading and final adoption on ordinance regulating non-union pay for City of Jackson employees for an increase for non-union wages by 3.8% for fiscal year 23 and 24, retroactive by July 1 of 2023.
So move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported.
I think one of my questions was already answered. It does not include the appointed officials, correct? I did not get a chance, I've been dealing with a wedding, and so I did not get a chance to read this when the packet came out, so I apologize for that.
So if appointed officials are on the scale, like you've set their wage to be grade whatever, step whatever, then it will move up with that. This is considered the cost of living adjustment that you guys review annually. not tied to performance or anything like that. So Matt's on scale, I'm on scale. Matt, are you on scale? On scale, then our contractor's our contractor.
And then, my other question would be, when was the last raise? Was it a year ago, or
It's been over a year now, because we try to do this in July. So
did you budget this 3.8%?
we budgeted 3 in the 0.8. We did some math, and it was a negligible amount, so we can accommodate it within the budget. There's a lot more to this, though.
Yeah, so I think my only request would have been for us to have Gov HR
Okay.
present, and maybe this is something that we probably could still do. I think it would be a good recommendation for us to still do this. I don't know if you guys got into the weeds of the attachment of the actual wage study that we did, but it is quite extensive and it's a lot of information. It's not very clear to understand. I think it's always made clear if the individual who does a study such as that to actually be allowed to come and do a full presentation of what the recommendation is. If you guys can recall last year, there was actually a motion that was made or a recommendation that was made to do actually a 7% wage increase for our non-union employees. One, because of inflation. And cost of living went up by about that much, right? And this year, I think this is what we expected to come back was a recommendation based on taking a look at a wage study that I think in this wage study, they compared 17 other communities and compared to our wages, and this was the recommendation that came back. I would like to be able to ask some questions to Gov HR about, like, is there something that we need to be doing to make sure individuals who are not currently waged in that 75th percentile on how we can get them into that 75th percentile. But without them being here, we can't ask those direct questions, but I would be in support of.
I'll make a
of the
motion to
increase.
postpone until the next meeting, since this is retroactive to July 1 anyway. They'll get a bigger check for a Christmas present. For Christmas shopping.
Hold on. Motion on the floor.
So can we move ahead with the increases and still have a presentation?
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Is there a reason to wait, other than, I mean, it's not going to affect what's being proposed?
She needs a second, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to answer any questions yet because there's a, okay, so the
There we go.
motion's been seconded for discussion.
So,
Thank
question mark.
So now, back to that question
Back to
again.
the question.
Thank you.
So
Can we do, yeah.
my apologies. I brought Doria Laporte, our HR manager here, thinking that she could field all the questions. That's my mistake. Should have brought Gov HR here as well. So what we're talking about is two different things, really. They gave us a robust report. The first component that we're asking you to consider tonight, well, the only component we're asking you to consider tonight is a 3.8% cost of living adjustment. Now, to the mayor's point, the report was more in-depth and very robust, and it prescribed a different way of thinking for our pay bands and breaking our employees up into the different groups based on their job descriptions, their technical skills, the amount of people they supervise, factors like that. And again, to the mayor's point, there are some positions that fall out of their recommended percentile. So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there is no reason to wait. I think that the city employees deserve this, and I think that it takes 2 readings plus 30 days anyway, so there's plenty of delay. But we will have Gov HR to walk you through the rest of the report so they can go into those details that are in the report about banding the different groups we have together and things like that, where you can talk in depth about how we can matriculate certain positions to where they need to be. We have some ideas internally. Obviously, we've been looking at this. We have some ideas, but always great to have this person, this Gov HR come and talk about it. So that's all I have to say.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Somebody else want to make a motion?
You already have one on the table, because I did one to postpone it.
Oh, you're right.
I do have a question, though. Forgot what it was going to be, though. It was brilliant, I'm certain.
Call me later.
So my question is this, say we come back next month in the 30 days, if this passes, if someone makes a recommendation of a higher or lower increase, does that have to then wait an additional 30 days past that?
I would think so.
The
It's
next
a,
reading.
It's a different, because it's an ordinance and it's pretty
Okay.
specific, I would think so.
Okay.
But it's all gonna be retro.
Yes.
It will be retro, yeah, to July 1st.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say. When I first got elected in 2011, our employee base was about 300 employees, and we've done a good job of bringing our employee base down. Are we staying, how many employees do we have?
Oh, geez, Doria, we had talked about this, it's around 220, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know, the minute we have more employees, now we've got legacy costs. And I know we've added for the lead lines and, I want to stay aware of the fact that we don't need to be, government doesn't have to be big to be effective.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think many people would disagree with that.
okay.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote, which he has already done. Passes unanimous. Would someone like to, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I would like to make a motion that we invite Gov HR to come back to do a presentation of that wage study, so that we could have some additional information and insight on the wage study itself, and be able to ask them some direct questions.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Where are they from? I don't know.
I don't know where this person operates out of. I thought it was Grand Rapids,
But Michigan?
Michigan, yeah, Michigan
Okay.
for sure.
So it's not a huge ask.
No. I would normally say you don't need to make that motion, but since I whiffed at bringing them here today, I appreciate the directness.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. All right, we look forward to seeing them next month. That passes unanimously, brings us down to 1111, Make-A-Wish. Zoning map amendments to 206 West Argyle Street, 207 West Argyle Street, 208 West Argyle Street, and 209 West Argyle Street. Looking for a motion and support to rezone this from L1 light industrial to R1 one-family residential as recommended by City of Jackson Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and supported.
What's this over by the fire?
Argyle's.
Not
There's an
really.
Argyle over there. I don't know where it turns from west to east.
Can someone give us a little bit of insight on this recommendation?
Oh, let me go back. I was gonna say, now I wanna Google it.
So this came up at the planning commission last week. I just read you the report. Consistent with the zoning designation of the neighboring properties and bring the improved development property closer to conforming and appropriate zoning designation. There are 2 vacant lots on the west end of West Argyle. Those are the parcels. Parcel numbers 2452 and 2453. Like I said, this was brought forth by the planning commission. And I think it is just like I said already, that it's just to make the parcels in the area all the same zoning designation for development purposes.
Yeah, that's the neighborhood right next to where the fire was. Not that I would make a different vote, I'm just, okay.
Just
Thank you.
curious if there was any objection from the property owner themselves.
I think they petitioned for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the issue? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Item passes unanimously, brings us down to 11.12. Looking for a motion and support for the approval of proposed zoning ordinance text amendments, Section 28-253, signed subject to permit or approve or other approval, amend Section D, subsection F, and subsection, is that L? I believe so, as recommended by the City of Jackson Planning Commission.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion on the item? Any brief description of what this is?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can tutor the planning commission own horn, and my approach to the city is to make things more business friendly. And what this does is make more use by right for signs, and so long as they can qualify for a sign permit and meet all those guidelines there. So I'm really happy to remove a lot of regulations and to make some uses by right.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So with the signs, do they have to submit a copy of the insurance when they put up signs?
Not on their property, but when they, like, take, for example, something in the downtown where they are overhanging our sidewalks and we have to approve a revocable license, then yes, they do. It's actually another process we're trying to streamline going forward because it's very convoluted and we don't think it's really necessary.
So do they have to submit every year?
I don't believe it's every year. I think it's just that application. Is RJ talking to you?
Passes unanimous, brings us down to 11.13, looking for a motion and support for the approval of proposed zoning ordinance amendments, Section 28-253, signed subject to permit or other approval, and Section 257, Section 28-257, signs that do not require a permit. Remove all language as it pertains to revocable license for signs and/or awnings in the right-of-way, as recommended by the City of Jackson Planning Commission.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, the clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimous, brings us down to 11.14. Looking for a motion and support for the approval to repeal Section 28-166, revocable license for signs and/or awnings in the right-of-way, as recommended by the City of Jackson Planning Commission.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
This is directly related to your question before, Freddie. Just trying to make it easier and quicker to get people doing what they need to do.
Seeing or hearing no other discussion on the item, clerk will tally and display the vote. Passes unanimous and brings us down to item 11.15. Looking for a motion and support for the to approve contract with R.W. Mercer for T.A. Wilson Annex Building Design/Build interior renovations with limited exterior renovations to the north building, which would be the annex.
So moved.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion. First question I would have would be, was this the only bid that was entertained for this particular project?
Yeah, this was the only bid that came in. We did have a pre-bid meeting where a few contractors in town came to the meeting, but everybody's so darn busy right now that a lot of them had to bow out when they saw how quickly we need this done.
Work is plentiful right now.
It is.
So, go ahead.
Jinx.
Uh-oh,
Okay.
you got,
Jinx.
you go, Mr. Dancy.
So, Mr. City Manager, can you just talk about this? Just for a short period of time.
I'll try.
Not too long.
So if you recall
Not
correctly, City Council established an ad hoc committee to study the issue. We started meeting in June. We've had meetings almost every 2 weeks on the nose. I think there was one time where a lot of people were on vacation where we skipped one of those meetings. It has been a good conversation, a good process to define what is happening with homelessness in our community and what current operations exist and where we think the city can play its best part. The city cannot solve everything, but the service providers in the room who worked with us, and I know Freddie, you were at a lot of those meetings, we coalesced around a plan where we operate a temporary shelter from November 1st to March 31st. And we talked about what would be needed there. We would need to have some on-site supports. We would also need on-site supervision in the after hours. We talked a lot about the perceived need versus varying points of data out there. But we think that this plan to build suites, one bedroom, one bed, and, well, actually, 1 to 4 bed suites within TA Wilson with a laundry facility and showers and bathrooms is the most appropriate kind of fit for what we're going for right now. That's all couched by the absolute reality that we've never done this before. And we don't know what we don't know, but we have had a great response from the nonprofit and homelessness work community advising us along the way and pointing out pitfalls and pointing out opportunities for success and pointing out where they could use a little help. And I think this is a decent result at this right now.
I think it would be a good idea to mention the individuals who are at the table supporting this recommendation as well. I know it's hard to remember everybody.
It is hard to remember everybody, and I don't know that they would say they recommend it. They know we have to do something, and they'd say they're definitely backing us. But we're talking about representatives from Community Action Agency, the Interfaith Shelter, the ISD via just got the name popped out of my head. Trusted Advisors, Residents in Action, TTI, Lifeways, Segway, trying to go around the room, the county, city council members, Aware Shelter, and Lifeway. Well, I said, yeah, Lifeways.
Okay.
So darn near everyone working in this space has been to a meeting. They've provided their input, and I think they're looking forward to having the city go forward on this project.
So, my question is, who's gonna run it? Who are you gonna give this project to so it's not in the hands of the city?
Well, I have drafted an RFP for the operation of this that will be put out tomorrow or Thursday, and it'll run for a couple weeks. Well, again, like every other bid we have, well, not like many bids we have, we'll have a pre-bid meeting to talk about the expectations of this. And I hope to bring that recommendation to you by the first meeting in October, so you can evaluate it and they can get a jump on getting to work. So I don't know. There are people in that room who said, we don't want to be involved in the RFP process because we want to have a chance to respond. So I think we're going to get a lot of support, and I think we're probably going to get people working together on this.
So what is the difference, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, what is the difference between this and the Segway's proposal for updating that bathroom for 20 grand? And they had, it was gonna be a permanent ongoing shelter, warming shelter. Because now we're, close to, how much are we into this now? We're gonna be into it. We're gonna be into this for $1 million versus $20,000.
Yes. So I don't know all the details of the Segway plan, but scale would be one of them. Just the size, or just the number of people who can be assisted, and scope. The scope, they're a mental health provider. and they were gonna go it alone with this method. And by building a broad coalition of people to collaborate on this, the scope is increased, and I think that we'll be able to take in a lot more people and offer a lot more services.
I also
So-
think we are in a much different place. And, you know, without speaking for TTI, or I'm sorry, without speaking for Segway, I also don't know if that was necessarily a project they wanted to pursue unless the support was there. And I think that support would have required more than the $20,000 that they needed for the renovation itself. That was a discussion that I've had with the director, that the financial support for staff and or additional need was also still there. The proposed request was for the renovations that were required for the building at the time. And at that time that it was proposed, council chose to go a different direction.
I'm just concerned that we're gonna have a total of $1 million and we're gonna dump more money into this building, and it's only a little part of the building. And we're not gonna have anybody who's gonna take it over. And I don't think any more money should be spent until we know who's going to take over that project. Because we do not have the capacity as a city to run a homeless or a winter shelter, or a summer shelter for that matter.
I will say that many of the partners who have been at the table for this discussion in the meetings have all recognized that the city is not saying that we want to run a homeless shelter. And I think that we have to take this piece by piece. Unfortunately, we are approaching another winter within the next, who knows how long. It could turn winter tomorrow. We are in Michigan. And then we're going to switch from having this conversation about trying to be proactive to having a reactive conversation, which is what happened last year. And then we end up spending an enormous amount of money on hotels. Whereas if this was the path that we were on last year, then we would already have a solution for this year's winter.
Well, I'm a no, only because I want to know who's going to run it. And I don't want to see our city's dollars, even though this is ARPA funds, it's still money that could be used. $1 million could have helped a lot of people with road assessments.
You couldn't have, just factually couldn't have.
Oh, okay, well, I apologize for giving that hope out there. But it could have been used for something, and I just don't want another Masonic temple on our hands, that we make decisions and then create a bigger white elephant there. So I'm not against the project, but I'm not for spending the money until we know who's going to take it over. I would be a yes if it was a proposal to do it and be spent once we know who that person is, or not person.
I think it's hard
but-
to ask somebody to commit to doing something if they don't know exactly the elements of what it is that they're going to be doing and if the facility is even going to be used. But I totally respect your perspective.
So can you tell me how the pallets are fitting into this too then? Because I mean, there's a
That's-
lot of moving parts
yeah,
to this. And so I
that's-
know that right now we're just looking at
Yep.
the annex.
Yep.
So,
that
yes.
has to be a future conversation, and that's something I want to have with the chosen operator, because there need to have some set policies around the deployment of those. I think we need to rethink our viewpoint on the pallet shelters. They are a great resource to cut the cold, but they are not dwelling units by any stretch of any code here in Michigan. So we have to rethink the policy on that and how they'd get deployed right outside the annex building. So they're in the mix, but we got to do this first.
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
just looking at the
Just looking
annex
at
at
this,
this
yeah.
point. And then can you explain to me, I'm a little confused about the amount is 421,830, but we're allocating 225, so where's the difference coming from then?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So in this activity that council previously allocated funds to, we've spent money on the acquisition of TA Wilson, We had that one housing rehabilitation that we stopped midstream, and then we acquired the pallet shelters, and we paid for last year's winter sheltering, and then with other costs of like city of administration, and then we bought coats and sleeping bags. So it leaves us with a balance of roughly $386,000.
Yep.
Because getting this project going to the next step required an allocation in excess of the $386,000. I tried to sit back and estimate how much the other things were going to cost. We're going to build this facility, but then it's going to need to have beds. And she left here already, so I can't call her out, but we did have a representative from the Interface Shelter advise us on some other things that we need to outfit these suites, including bed bug equipment, the types of mattresses we'll need to acquire, totes, not dressers, and things like that. So I had tried to anticipate and estimate what those costs would be, and then with just last year's Residents in Action report and where they spent their money, tried to estimate, and I'm gonna be the first to tell you, I could be completely wrong, tried to estimate how much an operator of this, to Laura's point, might come in with the RFP. So I tried to bake all those things in there, and I landed at 225 as a reasonable request to this council.
Got it.
Just know, there isn't a person in this world who tell you I'm perfect, so we may have to come back and adjust our numbers, but I tried really hard to put some thought behind these and talk to the people in that space to understand the requests I put to you tonight.
So then we're talking about the 386,409 balance, and this 225 is on top of that.
Yep.
Okay.
And to pay our build out and pay for those
Yep.
other incidentals, and hopefully we'll hit the sweet spot with an operator.
And then can you remind me again, what's the estimate for the RFP?
I have it
to run
drafted, and I'd like to put it out so long as I don't have too much from tonight to clean up tomorrow. I can put it out tomorrow, and definitely Thursday, and have it out for a couple weeks, have a pre-bid meeting, talk to people who want to respond to it, and then have this back to you guys to consider at the first meeting in October, is what I'm anticipating.
And is there a dollar amount attached to the RFP?
There's going to be, I thought about that, and so I did do some work with about the amount of hours involved between November 1st and March 31st, different pay rates, different types of activities that'll be there. So I have a range. Like I said,
Okay.
all I did to get that range was talk to people in the space and then look at RIA's report for how much have they paid for like their people doing the stuff. Subtracted their supplies, subtracted food, subtracted hotels, and try to get a sense of what did they actually pay them, get paid to pay their people.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Tried.
Yeah, I appreciate it, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I'd just like to say, I do think your process was a good process. Your meetings every 2 weeks, and you did a good job leading those meetings.
Thanks.
Seeing or hearing no other discussion, the clerk will tally and display the vote. And the item passes 5-1. And that brings us down to council member comments. Councilmember Schlechte.
Do we know when, I've got a few things, do we know when the North Street fire of the building's gonna get cleaned up?
That is the responsibility of the property owner. So I've been in contact with them. I wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah.
They're trying to sell the property, ironically. They had the property auctioned off before the fire, and it just hadn't closed in the interceding days from the auction to closing when the fire happened.
Was there insurance on it?
The owner hasn't indicated that they have insurance on it.
Do we have a fall cleanup? Have you guys talked about that?
We've talked about it. We're trying to thread the needle with the activities we're working on, the storm cleanup we have, and then hydrant flushing, and then leaf pickups. We're just trying to pick a good date. As I was telling a constituent, it'll probably be in October. as opposed to September like it was, but we're still trying to nail down the dates,
Okay.
the date.
You were gonna get us the patching costs.
Oh, yes. I emailed that to you.
I thought I saw something, but I think it would be nice if the general public knew how much we spent on patching and padding roads.
Okay. I'll put it
So
on
if
the
we
website
could
then.
just maybe put it in as a consent
packet.
agenda item or something.
I'll-
Because I think that that's gonna be an integral part of figuring out how we move forward on roads. 'Cause we spent a lot of money there.
I could see that. I'll put it in the packet for next time and we'll probably put it on the website.
Okay. Have you gotten anywhere on the rooming housing fees?
Yeah, staff's still looking at that. We're looking at like the experience we've had in town to try to figure out the nice place for that. We haven't, barring one person complain, haven't had too many, so we're trying to reach out to the different people and see. But we're also looking at other communities. We know it's a issue near and dear to you, but,
Well, it's near and dear to the community because we're talking about T.A. Wilson and a warming shelter and rooming houses are the next step.
you're the only one
for-
talking about it. That's what I'm saying. So.
Well, maybe because I'm talking to people who see it more closely. And there's a lot more rooming houses that I'm hearing of than I thought.
No, are they registered?
I have no clue. I didn't go look them up, but I would think that we would want to help. I mean, it's the next step in independence for some people, or it's the only step towards independence.
sure.
So charging Angelita would have a feeling for it because.
Yeah, we know exactly, like, the rationale you're bringing to it
Right.
is great, but it's the rationale of how this fits with everything else, because you can't change one thing and not expect a ripple effect.
Okay. I do want to thank you for changing how the water and sewer, how we can change that process from one owner to another. It is much easier. So I appreciate you doing that and your staff doing that.
You're welcome. You got any more thank yous? I got a review coming up.
There you go. Did you send, and I apologize because I've been dealing with this wedding. Did you send the new sale of city property policy out to staff or to council?
Not council, but staff as well. I'll send it out to council too.
Okay. And there were two ordinances that I had worked with Matt on that I'm hoping are on the next agenda, which is the transfer of the certificate of compliance for non-owner occupied and the animal ordinance.
Okay.
And then the last thing is, can we get an update on the extreme ownership program and what that's costing and and how many staff have taken it and what the travel expenses and all of that stuff? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Gunn.
I have no comment. I just want to thank again Councilmember Bennell for her service to the city and for sitting on city council, and wish her luck with her life changes.
Oh, you'll get that all next week.
Councilmember Dancing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, just, yesterday was 9/11, a lot of history. A lot of things went down. I just want to thank all the, firefighters, response personnel who do so much every day and that we don't see. But I just like to thank them, and every day is just a special day. And I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who works in that field, who go out and do the things that a lot of people won't even think about doing. That's all about it.
Vice Mayor.
No comments tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Bennell.
I know, you saved the best for last. No. I don't really have anything tonight. I just want to thank city staff and thank Jason for his presentation today. I know most of us, or at least some of us, don't necessarily agree, but I think moving forward, I think that we'll have some good changes and recommendations to our city assessment policy that will be more palatable for our constituents. And I guess that's it for me.
I just want to start by saying thank you to our citizens for their comments and being present here tonight. We may not always fully agree with some of the comments, but I do want to say how important it is that we have feedback and input by the citizens of our community. So we thank you for your input and your presence here, because it's very important. I would like to make a request on behalf of Terrion Walters' family that was mentioned. One, I'm hopeful that this issue can be something that the Police Oversight Commission is able to actually review, just to provide some feedback to the department. And then also would like to make a request that the GVI coordinator reach out to the family of Terrion Walters about this issue if no one has already tried to connect with them. I haven't been able to view those tapes myself personally, but I'm hearing two different stories, and at some point, Chief, I'll probably reach out so I can see that tape myself, even though stuff like that is very difficult to see no matter what the perspective it is. There's always two victims in the situation, regardless of how situations like that end up. And to hear a person is paralyzed for life, I think it warrants some attention outside of just regular procedure as well. I do want to send a special thank you for the service and congratulations in the retirement of one of our firefighters, Chad Everett. I know he's got a retirement party this Friday. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it, so I just wanted to publicly thank him for his service to this community and the fire department. As we can see in the last few months, how important it is for us to have individuals who serve in that capacity, who are putting their lives on the line to make sure that our community is safe. It is an honor to be able to say thank you for your service to this community. Definitely just want to take a moment, as some of our other council members have done, just to reflect on 9/11, and just thinking about where you were at in that time. It brings a whole different meaning to the situation, having been to ground zero, and looking at the large amount of names that are at that memorial site, and seeing people who are bringing flowers to that memorial site because their loved one is one of the people who were lost. And I can very fondly remember exactly where I was at on that day, at that time, and hearing it on the news and thinking, what boring NAS show are the people who I'm working with watching right now? But it wasn't a show, it was real life, and it was actually happening. And it's something that we should never, ever forget. And thank you to all those first responders who were on the site, and condolences to those family members who are probably still dealing with grief from that situation and how it's impacted our entire country. Also want to say, regardless of my jokes about not wanting you to go, I really don't want you to go, Councilmember Bunnell, but you and I had this conversation before about the work. I mean, all of us, I think anyone who has signed up to be in this position, who's run for public office, is absolutely not doing it for the financial benefits that they get from signing up for this. And always have an immense sense of continuing to do the work, because there's always more work to do. But to be quite frank, there will always be more work to do. So don't let us hold you back from living the rest of your life. I just know Lansing better be good to you, or we will pull you and your husband back to Jackson. So thank you again. I know you're not leaving yet, but just want to get our thank yous in now. Mr. City Manager.
You're not a fan of the 4077 MASH? Okay.
No, that was nap time for me. I'm not even gonna hold you up. I would go straight to sleep before the song even ended in the beginning.
Want to recognize 6 promotions at the Jackson Fire Department. I won't read their new promotional ranks, but congratulations to Trevor Blankenship, Dan Peterson, Frank Huntley, Shane Green, Joe Smith, and Joel Skripik on their promotions at Jackson Fire. We definitely thank them for their service and their commitment to the city of Jackson. And want to remind people that in 2022, the city of Jackson was awarded $16.5 million in a Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund award. And I'm happy to announce, it's not ready for prime time yet, that in 2023, we just got word on the down low that we should expect to receive $17.2 million in Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund money, with half of it being a grant. This will directly impact the water quality in the city of Jackson and the lead line replacement program and everything else that costs millions and millions and millions of dollars to replace in our infrastructure. So kudos to the team for a good application this year and getting another sizable chunk. By my city manager estimation math, looking at $33.5 million or so dollars last 2 years. Pretty good. It's me. Add that to your review.
Instagram writer. Looking for a motion and support to adjourn. It's been moved and supported. All in favor? See y'all in 2 weeks.